Greetings and welcome to Voices from Albion, the Magnetic Minstrel podcast. My name is Richard McPherson and I'll be your host tonight. Treat yourself to a tasty slice of some Dundee cake or perhaps a few fingers of your favourite scotch and sit back while I tell you the tales of the lost Albion Empire and the musical saga of Magnetic Minstrel. Episode 3, The Two Lovers, Aneurin and Kelestra. Part 1, Revelation. Aneurin's journey started the night of his mother's funeral. She was the only thing that tied him to the small village of Kingusi. His father had died of pancreatic cancer when he was 7. Her soul bequests to him but a ruby ring that belonged to his grandfather, along with a small parcel of land that sold for 5,000 quid. At night he got horribly drunk and in a fit of drunken rage chipped the ruby ring on the fireplace brick. In an attempt to assuage his anger, he sat down and started to play his harp. The more he played, the more his muse seized him, and the music became impossibly complex. It was not until he heard the rain fall that he looked up and saw the misty cloud hovering scant feet away. Inside he saw a solitary figure walking through rainy darkness along a lonely stretch of road. He was of middle height, with long white hair worked in an elaborate French braid and a haggard face that spoke of late middle age. He wore a black leather doublet and a cape worked with intricate Celtic ornaments that blew out in the wind behind him. There was a beautiful sword that hung at his side, the engraved Celtic knotwork on the blade shining in the occasional flashes of lightning. He almost seemed to stagger as he walked, and Aneurin saw the spreading red stain beneath his doublet. He turned suddenly, looking backward. The illusion shifted. He saw the distant spectre of a great castle engulfed in flames, its tall spires like candles burning brightly. What was even more fantastic was what lay before it, the massive skeleton of a great spaceship which also burned with an eldritch flame, its hull embedded deeply in the earth and its great bulk jutting upward into the sky, dwarfing the ruined castle. It was not until he turned back that Aneurin saw it reflected in another flash of lightning. The signet ruby ring on the man's right ring finger, the chip obvious even in the darkness and rain. Aneurin jumped up from the couch, sending the heart flying across the room. The image dissolved like wisps of paper. His mind simply could not take in what he had seen, and he paced the room frantically. Soon a deep exhaustion gripped him, and he lay down on the couch, falling into a troubled sleep. Part 2, Illumination. When he awoke, he convinced himself that what he had seen was a drunken hallucination. Yet in the days that followed, he could not put it down. He simply had to try again. Tentatively and with a certain amount of fear, he took up the harp and began working on the complicated musical sequence. His fingers danced over the strings to create the elaborate melody. Slowly the misty cloud formed before him. This time, however, the scene was different. It was inside a large audience hall where hundreds were gathered. On the right side were ranks of knights in glistening armour, their swords raised in salute. To the left were rows of tall woman warriors, wild and wanton, who pounded the floor with great wooden spears. Behind them were all manner of lords and ladies cheering their approval. At the front of the chamber sat twin thrones of majestic design. Upon one sat a young, elegant woman whose beauty was only surpassed by her poise and grace, her smile vibrant and welcome. In front of the other throne stood a remarkable man whose fine chiseled face and piercing eyes marked him immediately as a king.
his dark hair streaked with grey. His height placed him head and shoulders above all others in the room. A sword of intricate design hung in a scabbard at his side, its bright emerald gem pulsing in its hilt. He gestured to a figure kneeling on one knee before the throne. Approaching the man with open arms, he took his arm and lifted him up to a standing position, embracing him like a friend who had been long absent. Aneurin could not see the man's face, but it was not until he saw the cape with the Celtic ornaments, the beautiful sword with its engraved knotwork at his side, and the long white hair worked in a French braid that he knew who it was. As the man turned and he got a closer look at the haggard, lined face in the full light, he knew that he was looking at himself many years from now. As he pushed the harp away, the vision melted into oblivion. Fear gripped at his heart, but after a moment's reflection, he knew now what he would have to do. He would need to discover the truth of what the song had revealed.
As Aneurin began to explore the mysteries of his magical musical composition, it began to reveal a secret lost land. At first he was uncertain what he had discovered. It was not until later that he started to understand that what he had found was a song that allowed him to peer backward in time. He found that if he varied the tempo or the musical key of a composition, it revealed different aspects of the magical kingdom. He witnessed a tapestry of life unfolding in the veil through the misty window. He would eventually learn that what he found was a long-lost secret of the forgotten Albion Empire and its capital, Castle Dur, and the Vale of Lyonesse. As days passed into weeks, Aneurin began to understand that his discovery had a larger meaning in his life, and it was time to leave the quiet village where he had grown up now that his lost ties had been severed. He started to plan his departure, not really sure at first where he was going. His musical aspirations had taken him on various musical explorations, yet he had always returned to his mother and friends. In recent years, those things had started to disappear until there was nothing left to hold him. Now he was free of those emotional entanglements, and suddenly the world loomed large before him. One day he awoke with a new resolve. He would seek his mutual fortunes in a city well known for its ties to the entertainment industry. He would go to the City of Angels.
Chapter 2, Aneurin and Kelestra. Part 1, Childhood. Kelestra's tale begins at age 8 when her mother died of a prolonged illness. Her father, Aurelius, had only recently been crowned Emperor Liar of Albion, third of his line, after the death of his father Ambrosius, who had been Emperor Delphinius, second Emperor of Albion. Far too busy with the affairs of the empire, Aurelius began to search for a tutor to teach his young daughter the requisite things she would need to learn when it became time for her to undertake the governance of Albion. It came as quite a surprise when an entirely unexpected candidate presented to Castle Dur in the Vale of Lyonesse to engage in the task. Lord Taliesin Silverbrow, Bard of Albion. At first, young Kelestra was quite willful and headstrong in her opposition to the efforts of her infamous tutor. Yet her opposition quickly melted away with the cunning and charming ways of her mentor, and she found herself quite enchanted by the Bard of Albion. His elaborate number games and word puzzles won her youthful heart, and she found herself longing for their daily sessions and the time they spent together. They were to spend 3 years together as he tutored her in the manifold ways of the world. All too soon, in the approaching years of adolescence, the man that she had grown to love was summoned back to his mysterious realm from where he came, and Kelestra's heart was filled with longing to renew their acquaintance. Part 2. Adolescence. As Kelestra grew from the final years of childhood into adolescence, she began to blossom into a beautiful young woman. Her striking countenance, long curly mane of blonde hair, and slender figure attracted many would-be young suitors to try to win her heart. Yet she secretly longed for the lost figure of Lord Silverbrow, who had never ceased to fill her heart with his loving presence. Yet there was one man in her father's court who made no secret of the fact that he wished to seek a betrothal to her, even though he was twice her age, and whose very presence filled her with fear. Lord Drelvin, first mage of the Druidic Council. The first time she met the man, she found his demeanour arrogant and haughty, while his gaze upon her was written with barely concealed lust and desire. When she confided her fears to her father, she was relieved to find that he was deeply mistrustful of Drelvin's thinly veiled ambitions, and soothed by his reassurances that the first mage would never have her hand in marriage. As the years passed and Kelestra stood on the verge of womanhood, she was secretly thankful when Lord Drelvin plunged to his death from one of the high towers of Castle Dŵr, apparently pushed by a jealous lover. The matter passed from her memory, and she began to take the final steps towards becoming the heir apparent to the Empire of Albion and its first empress. Part 3. Womanhood. As she approached the brink of womanhood, her father began to press her for a possible match between the many lords of Albion. Yet Kelestra's heart always belonged to Taliesin Silverbrow, and she secretly yearned for his return now that she was a grown woman. Unbeknownst to her, events were brewing that would bring about the unanticipated return of the Bard of Albion. It was a dark day in the Vale of Lyonesse when a mysterious adversary arrived, known only as Vandro, proclaiming himself to be the Archdruid of Albion. Accompanied by his black dragon horde, he overran the Vale of Lyonesse, forcing all to flee to the sanctuary of the Carnelian Forest in the far north of Caledonia. Princess Kelestra herself was abducted at the last moment by the Archdruid and taken to his dark fortress at the Ring of Shadows. There she was imprisoned in his dungeons as he relentlessly tried to break her spirit and bend her to his will. In her captivity she cried out daily to the Bard of Albion to save her from her plight. Only her pleas received only silence in return, until one day she received an unexpected reply. Only it was not from her secret love, Lord Taliesin. The voice that responded to her was none other than Queen Danu, of the legendary Duo de Danann of the ancient realm of Atlantis. Lost long ago in the decimation of Atlantis, Queen Danu reached out to Kelestra across the Gulf of Time. She taught Kelestra the Antrai, whose lost musical strains would allow her to reach out to Taliesin Silverbrow in his mysterious hidden realm. Only then did she discover that her secret love resided in the far distant future, and she began to undertake the task of reaching out and summoning him back to ancient Albion. Chapter 3. Reunion. After returning from their first visit to Albion, Aneurin, Harper and the members of Magnetic Minstrel took months to prepare for what would be Aneurin's solo voyage. Their first order of business was to solidify their fortunes in the modern world. They would liquidate a significant portion of the precious gems given to them by Emperor Arcturus Pendragon and build themselves a base of operations in California that would be aptly named Imperial Ranch. All the while, Aneurin spoke with Kelestra in her captivity through the offices of the Time Zone, and the bond between them grew greater by the day. His preparations for his journey would include the fashioning of a new suit of armor and modifications to his song staff that were much more sophisticated, that would serve him much better on his solitary sojourn. Aneurin also trained in various martial arts to prepare for what he might face in Albion. Finally, the day came unexpectedly when Aneurin was speaking to Kelestra and their communication was interrupted by the archdruid Vandro. Aneurin heard the painful screams of Kelestra followed by the black voice of Vandro, telling him to make the crossing to Albion and face him and his dark servants on the battlefield. The archdruid abruptly truncated their confrontation, but not before a final, agonizing scream from Kelestra, filling Aneurin's heart with foreboding. Seized with a fathomless anger, Aneurin donned his new armor and together with the other members of Magnetic Minstrel undertook the musical summoning of the time song that would allow his crossing to Albion. The time had come to save the woman he had grown to love. This has been Voices from Albion, the Magnetic Minstrel podcast. I hope that you've enjoyed the show and will tune in next time for the next episode. If you want to know more about the Lost Albion Empire, please go to starofalbion.co.uk, and if you're curious about the band Magnetic Minstrel, please go to magneticminstrel.co.uk. So, until next time, stay safe in this uncertain world, my fine lads and lasses, and fare thee well. Voices from Albion, the Magnetic Minstrel podcast, is a production of Caramore Audio. Copyright Richard McPherson, 2020. All rights reserved.